Hey everybody, this is Rob with the Trucking Resources channel. And the last couple videos I did, there were some kind of gloomy videos in there. One was about the fire at Gentry and Sons Trucking, and then there was another one about a fatal accident. And I decided to do something a little bit more upbeat. So I thought this would be kind of fun to do. But I'm going to do it in 8 parts, because if I did it all at one time, the more I started studying up on it, I realized that it would just be way too long of a video. I like to keep them a little bit shorter. So I wanted to do what was the best decade in trucking. There is no right answer to this, I'm pretty sure. I think everybody's going to have their own opinion about it. But let's go through what I'm going to talk about. I'm actually going to combine the 40s and 50s. Now, I know I could go back before that. I'm not going to talk much about it. There weren't many roads, different things. It seems like trucking really came to be in the 40s and 50s, trucking as we know it. But I'm combining the 40s and 50s. And the main reason is because, a lot of the 40s were consumed by war, and then, war recovery after it was all over. So not a whole lot happened in the 40s, but some things did. So I'm going to combine that with the 50s, which had some pretty drastic changes to the trucking world. But then each one after that is going to be another decade: 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. As we go through it, we'll discuss, of course, trucks through the years. Everybody wants to see the trucks. We'll discuss trucks and what was going on. We'll also discuss, some government regulations that changed over the years, different things that happened within the trucking industry. The 60s were, like I said, 50s were a big recovery year. 60s trucks were getting better. 70s, 1970s, things that I study up. When you look and you don't dig real deep into trucking, they say 70s were the heyday of trucking. And maybe they were, maybe they weren't. But they say they were the heyday of trucking because of movies, Convoy and Smoking the Bandit. And they overlook some pretty bad things that happened in the 70s. There was strikes in 1973 and 1979. And, people died because of them strikes. People were arrested. People lost their business. There was a lot of things that happened through that time. Over the years, different things happened, like barrier states. Does anybody remember what barrier states are or know what they are? I will tell you that. It was in the South, and it put a real hurting on interstate trucking, all because of a regulation that states didn't agree with the federal government, and, it held everybody back. We'll talk about CB radios, because a lot of the old-timers out there, and I don't know, somebody called me a veteran trucker the other day. I guess at 21 years old, I guess I am now. I didn't really consider myself that way, but, but I did grow up in trucking, and I remember, CB radios throughout the years. I have a real nice one in my truck. It doesn't get used much because most other trucks don't have them now. So we will talk, evolution of CB radios through the years. Like I said, the trucks. We'll talk about the 1980s. Deregulation. Deregulation was one of the biggest things to ever happen in trucking. Some may say it was good. I think most would say it's good. Some might say it's bad. Who knows? We'll talk about that. A lot happened in the 90s. There was a whole lot that happened in the 90s, government-wise. So also in the 90s, our trucks were changing considerably. The mechanical engines were going over to electronic engines. The Series 60, which I think actually might have come out late 80s, but as I'm doing my studying, I'll find this out. But the N14, the Cat changed their 3406 over to 3406E, the Detroit Series 60s. All the different engines were changing over to electronics. We could talk about the good sides and bad sides of that. A few other things. There was a real bad F word invented in the 90s. The late 90s, FMCSA. That is a 4-letter F word in my house. That is the worst 4-letter F word in my house as far as I'm concerned. But sure we'll have opinions about that, and that's what I look forward to. So the 90s, then the 2000s. Things changed a lot in the 2000s. Everybody knows what happened in 2008. Well, a lot happened in 2008, but what happened to our trucks in 2008? We also had a recession. Some people will say it was the worst years for trucking, at the end of the 2000s. Then we'll get into the 2010s, I guess you would call them. So in 2012, I think it was, emissions took another step, and many more regulations, and well, we all know what is arguably the worst thing that ever happened, as far as I'm concerned, maybe the ELDs. And it just goes to more regulation, just more regulation. But it's not all going to be about government. That wasn't government stuff. We've had so many cool trucks throughout the years. Old B model Max, Diamond Rios, Marmons through the years. And we'll talk a little bit about the trucks. I can find it out. That some of the trucks that we have today, obviously I have a W900 and I have a 379. And we'll see how they came to be over time. The W900A, the old, I don't even remember the old Peterbilt models, but, I believe in the 80s, it was the 70s or 80s, my favorite truck, now I have a lot of favorite trucks, but my favorite truck that I say was ahead of its time was invented in them years. We'll see if anybody can guess it ahead of time. I'm wearing a Peterbilt hat, and I own a Peterbilt and a Kenworth, and I can tell you it wasn't made by Peterbilt or Kenworth. It's probably my favorite truck. I just loved it over the years, and I'm convinced someday maybe I'll own one and be able to take it around to truck shows or something. We'll talk about trucks through the years. We will talk about some of the cool things, Smoking the Bandit coming out, Convoy, BJ and the Bear, different TV shows, how the public has looked at us over the years. And you can't skip technology. You have to talk about technology, because if you talk about the good old days in the CB, you also have to talk about, phone booth rooms at truck stops and rest areas, and stopping to make phone calls. And, if you broke down, had to call out on the radio, and hopefully somebody could help you, or at least give you a ride. So we'll talk about that a bit. But hopefully this only takes me about, let me say I can get this done within about 2 weeks. I'll put some of these out. And I think we could have a lot of fun with it. Feel free to comment down below. Another idea I have, and it'll probably take a little while to put it together, is putting together some drivers who have driven throughout the generations. I would include my dad in that, because obviously he was such a big part of my trucking career, and he started driving in the late 70s. And he's in Florida right now because it's winter time here in Pennsylvania, but he'll be back up in the spring, and maybe sometime around there I can set up, maybe a barbecue or something, or, just old truckers sitting around talking throughout the generations about, the good old days, sitting around telling lies about how fast them trucks will go. So I hope you guys like the series, and like I say, I'm going to try to get it out pretty quick. I got a little bit of studying to go out. I know some things, but I started driving in 2001, so, right? Yeah, I started driving in 2001, so, I've only covered 2 of these decades. I rode with my dad a lot in the 80s and 90s, and I have seen the change through the years, but obviously 60s, 70s, 50s definitely are not something I know much about, except what I've heard. So I'm going to do some studying up on them. And, So hopefully you guys enjoy the video. And I'll hopefully have the first one out tomorrow. See how it goes and see what you guys like, and see if there's something you want to see more of. So thanks a lot, guys.